year 2030. Since the great pandemic of 2020, the virus has mutated 18 times. The latest strains caused no more than common cold symptoms. Vaccines were still considered the preferred method of protection, according to the World Health Organization. Everything went more or less normally until 2025, when U.S. intelligence officials provided irrefutable evidence that both American and foreign pharmaceutical companies were themselves creating new, more deadly strains of the virus. The conflict came to a head when a prominent whistleblower unexpectedly appeared at a congressional hearing to provide direct evidence that three of the largest U.S. pharmaceutical companies were developing viruses under the guise of preparing for future pandemics and saving lives. This whistleblower had exactly the same academic degrees as me, although his doctorate was 10 months before mine. After this event, everything began to develop rapidly. Official documents confirmed that at least 20 members of Congress and members of the president's executive team knew what Big Pharma was doing, including all 8 members of the Federal Viral Epidemiology Early Detection Task Force. There was talk of criminal charges against senators and congressmen, even impeachment of the president, although none of these charges had consequences, as opposing sides called them a political witch hunt. 3 major pharmaceutical companies have filed for bankruptcy due to a massive boycott of their products and a lack of consumer confidence. In 2026, a major new scandal pushed the virus and vaccines into the background when allegations surfaced against Bill Gates, one of the richest men on the planet. He made his fortune in the tech sector and has aggressively promoted plant-based foods in recent years while buying up farms in America's heartland at an alarming rate. Several senior members of his organization accused him of contaminating the country's food supply, and everyday American consumers began to listen. Over the years, the public has also been losing trust in the government. The 2028 congressional and presidential elections are the smallest in terms of turnout since 1890. Cable channels called this phenomenon cocooning instead of fighting the government, as at the beginning of the decade, the people simply became indifferent. I was sure that my career would not be successful, but I did everything possible to not lose heart. By the way, my name is Stephen Boswell. My wife Sarah needed a lot of support, and I found it therapeutic even when I was at my breaking point. She was the head nurse at Memorial Hospital and found herself in the middle of all this chaos from day one. Now the government had announced a new virus, just when my wife and the world seemed to be able to breathe easy. In addition to caring for patients, Sarah now also had to deal with angry and suspicious relatives who demanded access to their loved ones and, worse, insisted on using unconventional treatments. Some of these people began to behave aggressively, and the hospital had to be quarantined. By 2028, the problems will only get worse. The new virus, and specifically the enhanced vaccine to combat it, began to cause a mutation in the stomach lining of men. In women, this mutation led to a previously unknown form of endometriosis, affecting tissue inside the uterus and cervix. In the first year after the mutation was discovered, the incidence of ovarian cancer increased by 22%. Women were prescribed a variety of medications and home remedies to help the body naturally eliminate affected tissue during the menstrual cycle. Sarah and I went through it all together. She was my support, and I was hers. In 2023, when the crisis began, Sarah became very withdrawn, and her condition only worsened with each subsequent year. I managed to convince her to go to counseling, where she was diagnosed with borderline depression. She completely withdrew from the world around her, including me. I tried to make sure she didn't miss sessions and often went with her to appointments. By carefully writing down everything the doctors said, I tried to better understand what was causing her depression and how I could help her. It turned out that much of this was due to her work at the hospital and constant stress. The death of her parents in the same year also played a significant role. They moved to Europe a few months after we met, and 2 years later, shortly after our wedding, they died in the famous sinking of a cruise ship with Syrian terrorists on board. We talked about it a lot, especially in the evenings after dinner. I didn't let her withdraw into herself unless she had a very stressful day at work. 6 months later, Sarah began to emerge from her depression. These were the moments when I felt closer to her than ever before, even when her condition was completely stabilized. When the government bought out, in other words, essentially took over pharmaceutical companies in 2026, I fell into despair myself. I have worked for Aspen Industries since I graduated from university. Our company has been developing and testing formulations for most drugs, including vaccines for both viruses. On the first day, when I saw a military truck pull into our loading dock for another batch of drugs, I wanted to quit immediately. Almost. The monthly inspections conducted by government inspectors were so grueling that these days I literally lived on ibuprofen to somehow relieve the tension in my shoulders. The questions they asked to make sure I wasn't a threat were overly detailed, pointless, and exhausting. Sarah supported me as I once supported her. It was hard for her, perhaps even harder than for me. She understood little about my work, and when I tried to explain the details to her, I often became irritated. To her credit, at such moments, she assumed a calm posture and spoke softly, allowing me to talk and recover. Since the government stepped in and set its rules, many of us at Aspen decided we had to prepare for the worst. I was friends with 3 colleagues with whom we started working at the company around the same time. One evening, over drinks, we came to the conclusion that we needed to somehow keep in touch with each other. We agreed to buy cheap burner phones that we would only use when absolutely necessary. We might seem paranoid from the outside, but we saw with our own eyes how our colleagues were escorted out of the building by Department of Homeland Security officers and never returned. We knew some of them personally and could vouch for them. 3 of us found old laptops at home, and one of our group, who has a degree in software architecture, set up a VPN for us with a constant change of IP addresses in case our regular devices were under surveillance. We joked that we were paranoid and that the intelligence services would easily bypass our feeble attempts to defend ourselves. Yes, Sarah and I have been through a lot in the 7 years we've been married and the 9 years we've known each other. While supporting each other in difficult moments, we also often argued on a variety of issues. She believed in medical science, which she followed as part of her profession, which, in principle, was normal. I stuck to my science and was naturally distrustful, so we often argued about small things related to the virus and who the good guys really were. But finally, we started talking about starting a family. Over time, the country settled into a new normal, and we felt confident that the worst was behind us. My wife's working hours stabilized, and we began to spend more time together. One day in mid-November, Sarah returned home in particularly high spirits. Over the last 2 weeks, I have noticed that she is a little depressed and distracted. Nothing alarming, but she always chalked it up to work and didn't feel the need to go into detail. I asked what was the reason for her joy, and Sarah replied that it would be better to tell after dinner. When we finished cleaning, she sat next to me on the sofa, holding some documents in her hands. We, she faltered, were presented with an incredible opportunity. Stratagem Pharmaceuticals has selected 20 hospitals in the Midwest and their personnel to participate in clinical trials related to endo-B1N1. This was the scientific name for the current vaccine crisis. They need volunteers, Sarah said, more seriously than enthusiastically. I took preliminary blood tests last week and met the criteria. I didn't immediately find what to say, trying to comprehend what I heard, so Sarah handed me several sheets of paper. The first page looked like a typical clinical trial description. Stratagem Industries was created in the wake of scandals surrounding large pharmaceutical companies. To those of us who knew about such things, if that were even possible, strategy was considered the black rock of the pharmaceutical industry. Any criticism of them was quickly suppressed either by government agencies or by themselves. The second page looked more like a brochure for a cruise or vacation to the Caribbean. "Is this some kind of prank, Sarah?" I asked. "Ha ha, you played me. Are we going on vacation?" Sarah's expression went through a range of emotions until it finally settled into anger. "Of course not," she exclaimed. "I'm serious. This is serious." "Okay," I quickly answered. It looks like a brochure for some kind of resort." "Just read it, please." Her good mood disappeared. "The more I read, the more surprised I became. It was like a vacation, albeit a little unusual, a month of rest. But it was clear that this was also a clinical study for subsequent trials of the endo-B1N1 vaccine. Sarah and I, to a lesser extent, were expected to participate as test takers. We were invited to take part in a variety of resort activities, luau's, parties, and a variety of daytime activities, both on land and on the water. There was no mention of alcohol use, but I knew that in studies like this, alcohol and drugs are usually prohibited. "What exactly is this?" I asked in a more even tone. "Have you finished reading everything?" she asked doubtfully. I continued reading the remaining half of the page. At some point, I had to stop and reread the previous sentences. "Couples of all types will be able to enjoy the atmosphere of a tropical paradise, with intimacy between partners encouraged and support provided for women after completing the study. Many activities and personal time will help strengthen intimacy in a couple and improve relationships. Relationship-building classes are also offered for a nominal fee." "Okay, Sarah," I said. "I read it. Now explain what the hell this is." "Exactly what is written here," she answered, looking at me with slight disbelief, as if she did not understand what exactly I did not understand. "It's real, if that's what you mean. I checked everything thoroughly before I took the blood test." "Have you checked where?" I immediately asked. "I called the number," Sarah replied irritably. She didn't like my distrust, but she didn't like it even more when she was questioned about things she considered herself an expert on. Notification was sent to all doctors and nurses within a 400-mile radius. When I called, I was transferred to the deputy director of the study. He confirmed the research and the unusual conditions. Then he asked if I was interested in participating, and I said I was. She filled the gap. "I don't understand your mistrust and negativity," she added. "Tell me what's bothering you." "What could possibly be wrong?" I began. "Scientifically, it makes no sense." "What are you talking about, Steve?" she almost screamed. "I told you this is real. I talked to him for 20 minutes. "Well," I replied, "I hope you didn't give them your card details or personal information. You were probably just talking to some Eastern European student with a laptop." "Steve, this is not funny." Now she was angry. "Listen to me, Sarah," I interrupted. "Do you remember what I do?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked like her bubble had burst. "You're talking about mutation," I tried to explain to her in simple words. "In the vaccine. The mutation likely occurred because this particular booster was released without proper testing." I paused to make sure she was listening. "The solution to this problem is in the laboratory, not on some island. In genetics, not in beach huts. Are we going to have to wear protective suits on the beach? The only hope for correction lies at the subatomic level. It is strictly controlled." "Steve," Sarah looked. "What?" Confused, worried. She seemed to want to say something, but it was difficult for her. I wanted to fill the pause, but she found the strength to speak. "Darling," she said softly, "they have already fixed everything, as you say. The problem is physical. Some women's periods returned. In others, endometrial tissue does not shed normally. Some experience severe pain during sexual intercourse. The drug to eliminate the mutation works, perhaps even too good. This study is to study and stabilize sexually related side effects." "You didn't give final consent, did you?" I didn't like all this very much. "No, not really," she muttered. "I told them that I tentatively agreed, but that I needed to discuss it with you." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Okay, Sarah," I replied. "First of all, this doesn't make me happy. You haven't been yourself since the endo epidemic started, and the last few weeks have gotten even worse. I have a feeling it's because you planned this research behind my back. I still feel like you don't tell me everything. How can I help the person I love if you won't?" "But I don't do that," she almost screamed. "I'm just getting you involved now, aren't I?" Sarah played with words. "It's hard for me, Sarah," I said more quietly. "Maybe I'm drowning. You make unilateral decisions without me, without a specialist." Sarah looked down and fell silent. Tell me, my love, I asked. What's on your mind? Why do you want to do this so much? She thought about the answer for a long time. I decided to go to the kitchen for a drink. When I returned, she was ready. I want to do this, she began, because I want to change something, Steve. You do this every day, I interrupted. Ever since you started working at the hospital. I'm sure it's for others. Maybe at the very beginning, she clarified. When we first met, in the early years of the pandemic. Yes, I really did something important, but the last 5 years have been exhausting. At first, there was this noise, distrust. Then a government buyout. No, a takeover of pharmaceutical companies. Both of our industries have suffered greatly, and I have suffered along with them. Even though we're still saving lives every day, we don't know. You don't feel valued anymore, I said without a shadow of a doubt. She nodded vigorously and smiled, apparently pleased with my understanding. I have a hunch. Win-win situation. Perhaps this is a chance to get Sarah out of her situation once and for all. Another dark thought crept into my head. How many times will I have to save Sarah from herself? I quickly drove her away. Okay, Sarah, I said, on one condition. You set up a Zoom call with these people so I can ask questions. Not with the deputy with the main one. No promises until I hear them. 3 days later, I was sitting in front of our computer with my wife. Stratagem Industries quickly organized the call. They needed an answer, since all the other volunteers had already agreed. Sarah felt like she was being torn apart from the moment she returned home. I couldn't tell if she was excited or worried because I couldn't read her. Brian Knoxworthy introduced himself as the Executive Director of Research and Clinical Trials. Sitting next to him on the screen was Dr. Lin, head of the Department of Endometrial Biology. After the greetings, Knoxworthy got straight to the point. We're here to answer your questions, Stephen, he said. Begin. Well, I began, I guess I need to understand what exactly this research involves and what its purpose is. I understand that you have identified a specific problem in the vaccine that causes endometriosis and stomach cancer. That's right, Knoxworthy replied. You are right, we discovered this site in the vaccine and replaced it. These tests ended 2 months ago. Now we're ready to go to the FDA, and normally we would have moved on. The problem is that the government requires additional formalities that we didn't even consider 9 years ago. In those days, testing for side effects was not nearly as important as providing a solution and reassuring the public. He paused, apparently waiting for a reaction. I decided to demonstrate a little of my knowledge. I'm not a fan of government intervention in science, Mr. Knoxworthy, I told him. Just call me Brian, he interrupted. Brian, I started again, but in this case I agree with them. I would argue that it was the neglect of critical testing for side effects at the time that led you to the current situation with the government. My wife looked at me with a look that clearly said, don't screw this up. My wife and I are tested regularly and are required to take all boosters due to our jobs, as you know. With my education and experience, I fully understand the steps and how long it takes to create a reliable vaccine. I'm not happy with the way this process has been sped up over the last 9 years, so if the government wants to get it right, I'm fully supportive of that. Knoxworthy chuckled faintly as if he had taken me at my word. I didn't trust him. However, in those days, I trusted few people. I appreciate it, Stephen, he said. We're not entering uncharted territory, but we need to complete the process before submitting to the FDA to get the drug to people as quickly as possible. This is about saving lives. I've heard this too many times over the past 9 years and have remained unmoved. What other questions do you have? He continued. I heard that you had questions about, let's say, the conditions. I looked at Sarah. Had she stirred up the issue to Knoxworthy? She looked a little nervous. Yes, I said. I don't understand the need for all this pomposity. Island entertainment. Why can't this be done locally in a clinic, apart from the logistical convenience of having all the participants in one place? Fair question, he answered quickly. Noxworthy looked at Dr. Lin. He spoke, but with a noticeable accent, which made it difficult to understand. At its core, the research is physiological, Lin began. We are studying the physical effects, side effects. We want couples to be able to relax, to make you feel more comfortable. He seemed to have difficulty getting the point across. Stephen, Noxworthy chimed in, the goal is for couples to support each other through challenges, so that they can enjoy joint activities that are not related to intimacy. Besides, it's the holiday season and we're not heartless people. Believe me, if we could put it off until January, we would. I understood what he meant, even if I remained a little skeptical about the emphasis on intimacy. Perhaps other couples have different experiences than Sarah and I. Perhaps not everyone has such a strong relationship. Suddenly, I wondered how many times a day I would have to do my duty. Noxworthy continued, clearly wanting to get to the point. I think you will like our conditions, he said proudly. The U.S. government is not saving now. You might even meet some great people here. At this point, I felt a little uneasy. I thought I understood, or at least wanted to understand some aspects that remained hidden. But my pride did not allow me to ask for clarification, as if I were a layman. This decision, as I later realized, turned out to be a mistake. What about Christmas and New Year? I asked. And will there be a schedule that will allow my wife and I to spend non-intimate time together? What kind of medical tests will be needed? I imagine we will be tested on many parameters. Yes, Lynn said. A blood test that we will take as soon as we receive your consent. You've both had the virus, and it doesn't matter because you've both been vaccinated, including all the vaccines and boosters. Sarah will need to be tested for cervical or ovarian cancer before the test, and you will need to be tested for stomach cancer. To do this, you will need another tube of blood. We will send someone to your home, he continued, or you can come to the hospital where Sarah works. Noxworthy spoke immediately, as if he was in a hurry. Any other questions, Stephen? I thought for a minute. Actually, no. Then why do you feel so worried? I thought. I need to talk to my wife, I replied, and we will give you the answer. Due to the urgency of this matter, Noxworthy said, I'm sorry, but we need an answer by noon tomorrow. I'm sorry. But if the answer is no, we will need time to find and test replacements among other pairs. At least you will have time to think calmly. Sarah and I ended the call. We sat and talked for a long time, almost finishing a bottle of wine. My wife was unusually playful that night, but there was something in her behavior that I could not recognize. Was it gratitude or anxiety? We both fell into a deep sleep, satisfied. Over breakfast, Sarah begged me. Steve, I want to do this, she said. Please, say yes. I'm still not sure, I replied. In fact, I was hoping that the afternoon would pass and everything would end on its own. Then please tell me what's bothering you, she insisted. Let's talk about this, as always. I needed to think. I couldn't name anything specific, just a feeling. I don't understand their method. I couldn't figure out what exactly this all-inclusive study was like as they described it. But given the involvement of government agencies, I did not know what to expect. Something is wrong here. Sarah came and sat on my lap, taking my hand. You are so caring, she said sincerely. You always worry about me. I know it looks strange. I feel it too, but I need to do it. I want my husband to be with me to either enjoy it or protect me. I don't feel threatened, but I would always prefer to have you around rather than leave me alone. By 11:45, Sarah had convinced me to take this step. 2 weeks later, I held my wife's hand as we boarded our flight. These 2 weeks were busy with planning and testing. For the last week, my wife was given leave from the hospital so that she would not catch the virus and disrupt the study. My concerns were still there, and I constantly tried to push them into the background. Even after everything was explained to me, something was wrong. I promised myself to be on guard to protect my wife. From what, I didn't know. We were greeted like tourists when we stepped off the plane. Brian Noxworthy was right there to greet us. We sat on what looked like part golf cart, part ATV. The hotel or resort, I wasn't sure, was only 10 minutes from the landing strip. During the drive, Noxworthy and an elegantly dressed woman gave us a brief update on the weather for the coming days and provided us with a list of activities to do. Sarah and I were escorted by a different but very attractive staff member to our room on the 5th floor and told that there would be a welcome reception in the hotel lobby at 7 o'clock. Since nearly all of the participants were coming from all over the Midwest for the day, participation was optional, but we were told it would be a great opportunity to meet and network with other couples. The view from the window, and of course our bed, were so tempting that I thought of suggesting Sarah skip the event. But we went anyway. With small plates of gourmet appetizers and a glass of tropical punch, Sarah and I found a standing table and began exploring the room. I noted that there were people of all races and ages gathered here, with the exception of the elderly. A couple in their 40s approached us and asked if they could join our tiny table. Ron and Mary were chatty and told us how they met and how they had been married for 22 years. Neither Sarah nor I could get a word in edgewise until it was time for Noxworthy himself to take the microphone to greet us all. He spoke at length about the importance of this research for humanity and how we should be proud of our contributions and sacrifices. The word victims seemed a little redundant, considering that we were being pampered like rich people. Ron and Mary continued to chat while I tried to concentrate on Noxworthy's speech. My ears perked up when I heard something about marriage counseling and their morning hours every day except Sunday. I couldn't understand everything without shutting up the other couple, which would have seemed rude. I'll have to look at our welcome package later. The evening ended on time, as most of the 10 couples were exhausted after a long day of travel. Sarah and I went to our room, and she stunned me when she asked me to skip sex that night, promising to make up for it in the morning. "Sarah, relax," I chided her. "I know you're glad I agreed to this, and you're trying to be extra grateful, but just be yourself. When was the last time we had sex after such a long day of travel?" "I don't know," she shrugged, looking a little shocked at my little outburst. "I just wanted to be considerate." While Sarah got ready for bed, I flipped through the brochure and our schedule. On the second page, in a footnote at the bottom, it said, "Marital counseling is available free of charge upon request." I also took note of our schedule, which had Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday allocated, with morning and afternoon sessions, as well as just sessions from morning to early evening. The remaining days were marked as free time. This struck me as odd because such studies usually have strict conditions and limitations. I half expected a presentation on buying real estate for breakfast. My wife came out of the bathroom with a towel wrapped around her head and a loose robe on. "Honey," I began, "I heard Noxworthy mention marriage counseling. Do you know anything about this?" Sarah looked at me as if she had seen a ghost. Of course, she quickly pulled herself together, but I had known her long enough to notice that expression before she had a chance to hide it. She stammered. "Are we going to get a divorce?" She smiled, but it was clearly an attempt to hide her concern. I didn't know we were having problems in our relationship. I ignored her attempt to laugh it off. "No," I replied. "Just wondering what this is for. Did I miss something? Did you know?" Sarah sat down next to me and took the sheets of paper from my hands. "Steve," she said, gently reproaching me, "please, my love, pull yourself together and relax. Or rather, relax properly. You've been on pins and needles all day. I know what you're going through, and it's just in your nature. But please, darling, let's try to enjoy this experience." She found a line about counseling at the bottom of the page. "It says free, so maybe they're offering it to couples who might have had some problems before taking the study." She asked without affirming, and it seemed like an attempt to sell me something or distract my attention. Of course, I had no intention of relaxing. I had persistent premonitions that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Like many new days, Saturday morning brought a little more calm, and I was determined to spend the day with my wife. We had breakfast at the buffet, which was reminiscent of the menu at the resort hotels in Cancun. I didn't mind crab and lobster for breakfast, but I did wonder why the study participants weren't given some kind of restricted diet as a control condition. Ron and Mary found us and joined us at the table, and we discussed what we were going to do that day and the next. There were plenty of stressful activities, such as rock climbing, mountain biking, and zip lining, which Ron considered the least stressful activity of all. After 2 non-alcoholic mimosas, I decided to relax and stop treating the situation like I was at work trying to figure everything out. Sarah and I went on a wonderful bike ride that culminated in a lookout with stunning views of half the island, the Atlantic Ocean, and several outlying islets in the chain. Later, we decided to take a jeep tour around the island to get some rest. Noxworthy joined our jeep just as the driver was preparing to leave the hotel. He sat behind me and Sarah. The island was small, 5 miles in circumference at its narrowest and 8 miles at its widest. The excursion passed through its central part, rich in vegetation, and we ended up on the opposite side, driving along snow-white beaches. I was captivated by the beauty until we came across a group of young people playing beach volleyball. They were all attractive and quite muscular. The scene was so natural that it took me a full 5 minutes to realize something was wrong. "You said that the Stratagem Company owns the entire island," I said, turning to Noxworthy. "Yes," he answered with a hint of surprise in his voice. "Why?" "It's just," I said, "those young people there. Are they guests too?" Noxworthy responded almost immediately. He paused, looked at me, then at the back of Sarah's head, and then back at me. "Yes, they are guests," he began. "They are also testing participants. True, as part of a different study, but yes, they are here for the same reasons as you." "And I guess," I asked, "can you tell me what research?" Noxworthy was clever. Politely replying that he couldn't do that, he quickly changed the subject. I had no idea what he was talking about next, as I was immersed in my thoughts. Something was wrong. I'll need to have a serious talk with Sarah as soon as we get back to our room and are alone. After a wonderful dinner, Sarah and I went to our room and took soft drinks to the balcony where we sat and watched the sunset. Sarah made herself comfortable next to me on the sun lounger. She looked more content than I had seen her in a long time. I wondered if her satisfaction would come at the expense of my anxiety. There were things I should have asked in retrospect, but I loved Sarah. I trusted her with my safety, even though it may seem stupid, but we are all stupid in some ways. There were too many ridiculous and suspicious aspects to this study, but my Sarah wanted to participate with all her heart. I decided to do everything possible to protect her, without even knowing from what. Sarah and I sat there for a long time on the balcony. It felt good to hold her in my arms. Finally, we stood up and walked into the bedroom holding hands. This night of love turned out to be different, almost transcendental. She did her best to satisfy my carnal desires, or perhaps opened herself up completely. As we lay next to each other, trying to catch our breath, I asked her what came over her. "I don't know," she purred. "It's just this place. Or the love I have for you and the fact that you are there for me while I do something meaningful for people. Maybe it's all about me, I don't know. I always thought that I was helping people, even saving them. But over the past few years, I have begun to doubt this. Thank you for loving me." I hugged her tighter without answering. We fell asleep without separating our embrace. Sunday began the same way Saturday ended. I woke up to Sarah's soft kisses entwined around my groin. No matter how much I wanted to go to the toilet, my wife was not going to let me go until she finished what she started. After the shower, I reciprocated her feelings, and Sarah experienced great pleasure, which was unusual for her. In almost 9 years of marriage, I probably no longer aroused her former desire, but this morning everything was different. Over breakfast, we decided to go jet skiing, and then, if we had any energy left, take parasailing lessons. At one point, a resort employee came to our table and told Sarah that Dr. Lin would like to speak with her as soon as we finished our meal. My wife looked worried for a moment, almost worried. but she quickly pulled herself together and, smiling at the employee, said that she would come over a little later. "Is everything okay, love?" I asked her. "Yes," she answered immediately. "I was completely immersed in communication with you, enjoying today." She gently touched my cheek with her palm. "It just reminded me why we're here." We walked through the lobby and up to the second floor where the offices were located. Sarah stopped at the entrance. "Let me find out what they need," she said quietly. "Wait here, it will only take a minute." She lied. She was gone for about 5 minutes, but we were soon back in the room, getting changed and soon headed to the dock to start our day. I asked her what exactly she needed to do on Sunday morning, and Sarah replied, "Oh, nothing important." I had to wait until the next day to find out all the details or talk to Sarah and perhaps Knoxworthy himself. Strangely, at that moment I almost stopped thinking about them or even about my wife. My thoughts revolved around myself. My work was important to Sarah and me and to our lifestyle. I didn't want to risk raising unnecessary questions and creating problems ahead of time. Instead, Sarah and I spent another wonderful day on the water and sand. We laughed a lot, and my anxiety gradually began to subside. Dinner this time turned out to be truly romantic. We ate in a chic restaurant that served steaks and seafood. When we returned to the room, the question of sex did not even arise. The sun was pretty exhausting for us, and besides, Sarah used a cream with only 50 SPF protection. We lay next to each other, hugging each other, and the warm tropical breeze gently blew on us from the open balcony. I fell asleep instantly. When I woke up, I realized that it seemed like I had forgotten to set my alarm. Then I realized that it was my phone ringing my cell phone, not the room phone. Sarah wasn't there. I looked at my watch and saw that it was already 9:15. Half asleep, I reached out and picked up the phone. "Hello," I muttered. It was Brian Knoxworthy. He asked me to come to his office as soon as possible. I apologized for oversleeping, but promised that I would meet him before I went to breakfast. Knoxworthy's office was on the second floor, deep in the complex. Two massive mahogany doors stretched all the way to the ceiling. After I knocked, a voice from inside immediately invited me to enter. "Ah, Mr. Boswell," Knoxworthy greeted me warmly. "Come on in." Dr. Lin sat in one of the two chairs in front of the table. Two large men stood at the door with their hands clasped in front of them. I looked at them for a moment, then turned to our host, giving him a questioning look. "Part of my security," he said. "Join us." Every hair on my body stood on end. Everything that had aroused my suspicions since arriving at this resort and vacation now came to the fore, and I went into defensive mode. "I must thank you," Knoxworthy exclaimed, "for your help and for your selfless decision to sacrifice this month, not to mention your holidays, for this extremely important test." "Well, yes," I chuckled nervously. "You should probably thank my wife, not me." "Oh, we already said thanks," he replied with a hint of sarcasm in his voice. "And that's what brought us to this conversation," he continued. "I learned this morning that your wife, Sarah, has still not explained all the details of this ordeal to you, and that is unacceptable." He gave me time to process what he said. I was dazed, mostly from the tension. The large screen behind his desk came to life and displayed a familiar anatomical image of the female reproductive system. Knoxworthy nodded to Dr. Lin, giving him the floor. "Mr. Boswell, as you probably know," Lin began, trying to overcome the accent, "the female body is a complex structure, a vessel, if you will, with many physical and biochemical complications and obstacles that are not found in other parts of our body." "That's putting it mildly," Knoxworthy chuckled, interrupting him. "It can be compared to a petri dish in the middle of a mushroom farm. This vessel can be home to viruses, bacteria, fungi, and sometimes even a fair amount of fentanyl if it belongs to an illegal immigrant working for the cartels." Knoxworthy seemed to be the type to laugh at his own jokes. But when he turned and saw the expression on my face, his wit immediately disappeared. "So, Mr. Boswell," Lin filled in the pause, Do you know how many genotypes of male DNA and fluid have been identified to date? I simply shrugged, taking another quick glance at the guards. Noxworthy took the floor again. 15 years ago, the answer to this question would have been 8. Today, thanks to scientists like you, we have identified 160 unique markers for DNA and its transport system. This is interesting, I said impatiently. And is there any connection here with what my wife didn't tell me about? Stephen, Noxworthy replied more seriously, on Saturday, during the Jeep tour, you asked a question about the young people on the island. I was informed that Sarah spoke to you, but your question confused me and made me wary. So I spoke to Mrs. Boswell this morning, and now find myself in the awkward position of explaining everything to you myself and perhaps clearing up any misunderstandings. Mr. Boswell, he said after a pause and with a sigh, there are 10 couples on the island, including you and your wife. There are also 16 other men here, and this is our 4th of 10 trials. He fell silent again, as if expecting me to get to the point myself. Dr. Lin intervened again, filling the silence. As we told you over video, he said, we have the chemical required to eliminate this side effect. The drug is stable and effective. These tests are designed to complete the physiological part. You may be familiar with the term intervention research. This is what your wife signed up for. I jumped as if I had been pushed. I want to talk to Sarah, I demanded in a panic, right now. 2 large men immediately stood on either side of me, relaxed but with threatening expressions on their faces. Men that size shouldn't be able to move that fast. Sit down, Mr. Boswell, Noxworthy ordered. I replied, less confidently, I need to see my wife. Stephen, he said in a quieter, conciliatory tone, Dr. Lin and I are trying to explain everything to you as concisely, maturely, and compassionately as possible. Please understand, sir, we are embarrassed too. I still didn't sit down. I stood surrounded by stratagem, security guards, listening. What you should have learned from your wife is that these trials are a necessary final step to bring the drug to FDA approval. The drug works, but with the accumulation of endometrium and its rapid elimination, various complications can arise, one of which is significant discomfort during sex, especially intercourse. Others, let's call them side effects, can be caused by the drug interacting with different types of DNA and fluid. All of them must be identified to warn of possible side effects. No, I said firmly, I didn't sign up for this. Please call my wife here so we can discuss this. Excuse me, Mr. Boswell, Noxworthy took the lead in the conversation. I'm afraid this is impossible and there is simply nothing to discuss. Mrs. Boswell is probably currently in her first intervention session. I was in shock, as if I was petrified. All the air seemed to leave my body, and feeling my legs giving way, I allowed the 2 men to hold me and sit me back in the chair. Let's put aside the formalities. Can I call you Stephen? Noxworthy at least sounded sympathetic. We're sorry that you had to find out this way. I sincerely regret that I did not know that your wife did not tell you this. I appeal to you as a scientist and biochemist. I ask you to listen to me and try to find a way to resolve this situation, this impasse. We don't want to stay. I grabbed every opportunity, although I knew that the guards were here for a reason no one was going to retreat. I can understand this and accept it as an isolated incident, as a misunderstanding, and I will deal with my lying wife at home. It's not going to happen, he said straight-faced. Nonsense, I shouted. We're leaving, I tried to get up, but the men grabbed me tightly by the shoulders, depriving me of any opportunity. The only reason we're talking now is Stephen. He ignored my demand. This is your professional activity. I assure you that we carefully monitor our process from selection to completion. No, I interrupted him again. You misled me on a Zoom call. You deliberately kept silent about what kind of research will be conducted. We're leaving. I have a recording of the call, Stephen, he said sadly. Let me play it for you. He pressed a button on the remote, and a recording of our call appeared on the screen, reproducing the exact part of the conversation. Besides clinical sex, we understand that it is a big ask to ask couples in a relationship or marriage to abstain from intimacy for an extended period of time. Besides the requirement that the study include couples, we did the research and a warm island seemed like the best way to help couples reconnect. You are playing with words, Knoxworthy, I said, or just play games. I took it the way my wife made it clear that clinical sex would be between me and her. Otherwise, I would have told her to give it up right away. If it turns out that you or stratagem coerced her or deliberately hid important information from me, I fell silent, realizing that I was in a hopeless situation. My wife outright lied to me. I didn't understand why yet. Knoxworthy got his way. My job and possibly my life could be on the line. If the federal agencies treated the transport of medical supplies as a military operation, then why not treat this study the same way? Knoxworthy noticed my silence and continued with seriousness. Sorry, Stephen. His voice became authoritative again. Your wife signed the contract, even if I wanted to free her. And we have an extremely tight deadline. The loss of one of the participants in a clinical trial means the failure of the entire project. We would have to start from scratch, and lives are at stake. Women are dying, Stephen, and time is running out. Enough of this, I muttered, and I know that you always have spare members for such a case. Find someone else. That would work, he replied, a week ago. But the information reached me only on Saturday, and I received confirmation on Sunday morning. Is this why you called Sarah? I asked in shock. He just nodded. I thought about it. Then, relying more on instinct, I continued. By not letting me see her now, I said, you are ruining our marriage. How will the media perceive this when we return, because I won't lie for you or stratagem? No way, he sighed heavily. You have a choice. You can accept what your wife does for the greater good as well as for her own benefit. You can deal with her deception after the end of the test, or you can begin to settle everything here on the island over the next 30 days. We have 3 family therapists here, and I offer you the best one exclusively for both of you until the day you leave. Yes, of course, I spat sarcastically. Surely many husbands have problems with what you are doing here. Not as you think, Stephen, he replied with pleasure. Yes, therapists are here to help with any intimate relationship issues that women's partners may have. But all these partners, with the exception of you, of course, knew what they were getting into. Now, he continued, Stratagem is also willing to pay for therapy after your stay here, for both of you. It is standard practice to continue to work with issues of intimacy, but not with issues of trust or respect, which are present in this case. I believe that you both can overcome these problems and create a stronger marriage in the future. As for negative publicity, there will be none. It was in the agreement you both signed. Tell me about the sessions, I demanded, without knowing why. I was already imagining the most unpleasant pictures. Well, he was clearly embarrassed by my interruption. The sessions begin with interviews, during which the psycho-emotional state of the participant for that day is determined. Your wife was given a low dose of an experimental drug before your arrival. It will also be administered once a week. As the test progresses, she will be asked questions about how she felt from the previous session to document any abnormalities. Pain, discomfort, and additional natural discharge will be discussed. Then a pre-examination is carried out by a gynecologist. 2 volunteers engage in clinical coitus until the man is finished. A post-examination is then carried out to collect a sample of the mixed fluids. The woman is then provided with a cleanser of her choice and heads to the shower. I don't understand how a husband or partner can put up with this, I said. And I assure you that they are humbled. Knoxworthy grew impatient, but remained confident. All husbands and partners are fully aware and supportive of the procedures. During the 4 weeks on the island, all couples have time to themselves Saturday, Sunday, and Wednesday, when they can enjoy all the facilities on offer. Previously, it was Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday, but after the first study, we changed the days so that couples had 2 days off together. This helped couples grow closer and reduce possible feelings of insecurity. This study includes 6 married couples and 4 long-term partnerships. You can talk to other men, maybe do something together on the days Sarah is competing. Well, I said sarcastically, you really thought of everything. We think so, Knoxworthy smiled, but without any smugness in his voice. I believe that we ask that you, as a loving husband and fellow scientist, remain despite what you have learned this morning. Explain to your wife that there are clear problems in your marriage that need to be addressed, both here and after you return home. Keep your balance, support her. Try to work through your problems in a romantic, tropical setting and support us too. You will help save 200,000 lives in the first 20 months. I understand, my answer was restrained. Just accept it. Be a submissive cuckold and humble yourself for the sake of humanity. Something like that. Steely notes were heard again in Knoxworthy's voice. Raising the control panel, he said, "Now I'll show you something. This is a personal interview with your wife, and we don't usually share that kind of material even with our spouse. These records are made to protect the participant and the study from possible legal consequences. In this case, I think it's important that you see it." On the screen, Sarah sat on a chair, her hands nervously clasped in her lap. She was looking somewhere straight ahead, not at the camera. "Can you briefly tell," said a male voice over, "in your own words, why you agreed to participate in this study?" "Well," Sarah answered a little evasively, "I work in healthcare, the chief nursing officer in Columbus, and our institution received a request to participate in your study. Volunteers were needed. Besides this, Mrs. Boswell," the voice continued, "did you have any other reasons for participating in the comparative study?" "Yes," she sat up straighter. "My mother had ovarian cancer. She and her father traveled to Europe for experimental treatment and later died in a terrorist attack. I know that at that time she was in remission. I've had tests done and I have the same marker, although I'm worried that after the vaccine it could lead to cervical or endometrial cancer. Sarah broke my heart in one morning and the blows kept coming. Why did she keep this a secret and hide it from me, her husband? Now I knew more about her parents and why they went to Europe." "So you have a personal interest in this research?" asked the voice. "Yes," she tried to pull herself together. "What is your marital status, please?" "I'm married," she answered. "Husband's full name. And how many years have you been married? Age?" "Stephen Boswell," she answered. "He's 33, I'm 32. We have been married for 9 years, and we have no children yet." "Is the relationship monogamous?" Sarah tilted her head slightly. "Yes, of course," she said confidently. Her confidence began to fade as she thought about the question. "Well, that is, from my side, yes." She hesitated, searching for her next words. "And I'm 99.9% sure that on his part too. We love each other deeply." Knoxworthy paused the video. "As you can see, Stephen," he turned off the monitor, "Sarah has a good reason for being here. If you love her as much as she loves you, why not stay? Support her, but also make it clear that you will no longer tolerate secrets in your marriage. Deal with the problems. Then grow old together. Everyone loves a happy ending, and we're here to help." It was too much. I loved Sarah with all my heart. I just found out that she can repeat the fate of her mother. Although, not really. Oh yes, and she had unprotected sex while I was sitting here stupidly. After visualizing this, I felt my stomach rise to my throat. One of the guards handed me a trash can. When I finished, someone handed me a box of tissues. In those few minutes, I made several decisions. I couldn't know. I didn't want to stay here knowing what Sarah was doing. Knowing that she will do this for a whole month. That alone would kill our love and our marriage. It didn't matter what Knoxworthy had to offer. He had his own agenda. Strategies are not as cautious as they claimed. The reality of how blind I was began to sink in. I was so worried about how the drug company might hurt my wife that I didn't even think about the possibility that Sarah herself might be stabbed in the back. I needed time alone to think things through. There are too many questions and too many variables. I didn't like being pushed into a corner either. "No," I finally answered. I don't think I'll stay. Okay, Stephen. Noxworthy took a deep breath. This is a sad outcome. I thought that a husband and a man of your profession would be able to look at things more objectively. I think we should now discuss option number 2. My security, he began, will escort you to your room so you can get ready. The pilot should be able to come back for you in about 2 hours, so you'll have at least an hour to change your mind if you want. Otherwise, upon returning to the mainland, you will be met by 2 federal agents who will escort you home. They will be with you until the study is completed and Mrs. Boswell returns home. What do federal agents have to do with? I fell silent, realizing the essence of the situation. Noxworthy confirmed the rest without further explanation. As you probably know, he said, the government and the pharmaceutical industry are now completely intertwined. Our goals are their goals. This research cannot be compromised or made public. I will not allow some resentful husband to interfere with our most important work. The stakes are too high. Noxworthy turned away and went out onto the terrace, followed by Dr. Ling, leaving me like a child. The guards escorted me to the elevator and up to my room. Returning to the room, I threw my suitcase on the bed. Then I had a thought. I need to contact someone back home. My phone was nowhere to be seen. Someone must have come into our room to take it while I was in Noxworthy's office. I sat on the bed and tried massaging my temples to relieve the migraine that had begun. I had a spare phone at home and an old laptop that doesn't use my IP when connected to the VPN. I'll just have to figure out how I'm being followed when I get back. The minibar contained small 2-ounce bottles, just the right amount to relieve stress and tension without getting drunk. I mixed 2 vodkas with half a glass of orange juice. As I mulled over the last 45 minutes, I realized that while they had no intention of kidnapping me by keeping me here, they were perfectly willing to restrict my freedom of movement in my homeland. Will I still have a place at Aspen? Will the feds be watching me and my daily routine? Will I be allowed to stay at home, or will I be moved to another location? I've been thinking about this. If they were going to keep me, I concluded, I could only hope they would let me go when they were done with Sarah. But if I am allowed any freedom of movement, whether at home or at work, I will need help and a way to communicate without being overheard. I will have to create a new mailbox on my old laptop. I had no idea what the feds could do. Maybe they would catch me right away and things would end badly for me. If the agents are going to monitor me electronically, that means my home is already equipped with video cameras and microphones. Communicating with the outside world will be extremely difficult. As I was packing my toiletries into my suitcase, I heard the door open and Sarah's voice calling my name. Who are these people behind our? Sarah stopped when she entered the bedroom of our room. She tried to speak calmly, but I could sense her nervousness even before I turned to her. There was a look on her face. Was it happiness? I've seen this expression many times when we've ended a long love-making session. So much for clinical sex. When I turned fully towards her, her face changed at the sight of my expression. Then she noticed my suitcase. Stephen, she said, or maybe asked, then fell silent. Why are you packing things? Where are you going? When I didn't answer right away, she added, what did you do? All the indignation that I had been holding in suddenly burst out. I felt like it was about to burst out of every pore of mine. What did you do, Sarah? I asked indignantly. What have you been doing for the last few hours? You, she stuttered quietly, you seem to know. You can't even say it, can you? I picked it up. Yes, I know. Was it nice? How many times did he give those emotions? I couldn't resist. Were you going to run in here and offer me a second freshness? While I was packing, I acted out this conversation in my head. In my mind's eye, Sarah looked sadder, more depressed, and clearly regretful of what she had done to me. But this did not happen. Her posture looked as if she had gained 100 kilos as she sat heavily on the bed. I noticed only faint remorse, only possible regret. I was going to tell you the truth, she said. I've been trying since we boarded the plane, but I couldn't find the words. Nonsense, Sarah, I shouted. You knew I would never agree. So if you're telling the truth at all, it's only now, when it's already too late. And you know what? Lynn and Knoxworthy have already done all the dirty work for you. You can imagine my surprise when I realized that I was becoming an involuntary cuckold while they looked at me with pity. They said I needed to leave, I lied. They didn't like my reaction and weren't too happy about my questions and accusations. When I demanded that they let me see you before you did this, their people surrounded me. Sarah's face changed as if she had experienced real horror. So now you're left alone, I told her. Please, Stephen, she begged. Stay. Let me talk to them. Please, I need you. I'm sorry that I couldn't. I couldn't tell you. I know I hurt you, but if you can put it aside for a minute, I'll explain everything. I can help you. Hardly, Sarah, I answered, staring at her as if she were a stranger. In fact, she was a stranger. Sarah apparently perceived my hesitation as weakness, as a crack in my defense. I'm doing this for our sake, she tried to justify herself. I raised an eyebrow, and she changed direction. Yes, for my own sake too. But mostly for our sake, and for the sake of the world. A thought flashed through my mind. So, on your grave, we will engrave. Loving wife Sarah had sex with 16 men in a month to save the world. Everyone who knows you will be so proud, especially your loving husband. Sarah lowered her head, exhaled heavily, her hands nervously twirling something in her lap. I noticed this. I held my breath, holding back a heavy sigh, and tears began to roll from my eyes. I was desperately trying not to lose control. Sarah raised her head and saw my deep grief and tears. Then she followed my gaze to her left hand. You didn't even take off your rings? I asked her. Sarah nodded, at a loss for words. Well, this is at least something. My anger again gave way to bitterness. That tells me that at least on some level you understand that this is wrong. Give them to me. I extended my palm to her. Maybe I'll return them to you, maybe I won't. Sarah screamed, but after a short pause, she gave up the rings. I need to go, Sarah, I said without emotion. The plane is waiting, and to be honest, now we can't talk normally because I can't even look at you. I might still be here in January, maybe I won't. Understand one thing. Sex with strangers for a month and expecting me to agree to it is not even the worst thing you did to me. Not at all. Sarah looked puzzled, with a mixture of bewilderment and perhaps even selfishness in her expression. I had given her too much in just a few minutes, but I could see it in her eyes. She was sure that she was doing the right thing, that she was doing something good, noble, and maybe even heroic. Her horror was associated only with my harsh answer. Her eyes said that she now doubted whether she knew me at all. If you pack up now and leave with me, I said, we may still have a chance to save something. Don't think of Sarah, just do it. I can't, her face distorted, as if I asked her to cut off her hand. I have to see this through to the end. Sorry. That's all, I said, closing the suitcase. Goodbye, Sarah. Knoxworthy was waiting in the lobby. His driver and guards were also there. I see you have made a decision, he said, not asking, but affirming. Anyway, I think you're making a terrible mistake. I looked at his outstretched hand, but did not shake it. Knoxworthy withdrew his hand without appearing offended and added, Bon voyage, Mr. Boswell. One of his guards sat with me in the back seat of a city car for the short 10-minute ride to the airfield. He made it clear that I would be met on site by federal agents who would escort me home and explain what my restrictions would be until Sarah returned at the end of the month. I told her not to come home, I lied bitterly. So what's next? The guard shrugged and told me to think about it again. Then he added that it would be worth talking to the FBI agents about this when I returned. So it's still the FBI. Luckily for me, not BlackRock or other government mercenaries. The private jet was refueled for a direct flight to my hometown airport. Apart from the pilot, there was only one crew member on board the flight attendant. A huge man whose biceps were so tight that they could match the diameter of my shins. Apparently, he wasn't just here to hand out water and nuts. I didn't care. I leaned back in my chair, trying to get comfortable, and closed my eyes. Knowing that I was unlikely to be able to sleep, I began to experience the shock of the destruction of my life with Sarah. If I could get over that and the emotional storm, maybe I could start making plans before we land. My once loving wife betrayed me and withheld important information that could have saved our marriage. She probably had her reasons now that I knew the truth about her mother. However, she showed me neither respect nor trust as she did her husband. I was not one to tolerate double standards. I put everything I could into the relationship with Sarah, and she, in my opinion, not only did not respond in kind, but simply wiped her feet on my feelings. But Sarah could wait. She'd be gone all month, and I had more pressing concerns when I got home. I'll probably be placed under protective custody or put on surveillance, and my income is probably in jeopardy too. First, I needed to understand how bad it was. Leaving the plane, I immediately noticed two agents. First of all, they were looking directly at me and no one else. Secondly, they were dressed exactly the same as those guys who interrogated us every month at the company in Aspen. Now that my fears were confirmed and confronted me live, I felt even more furious at my wife. She's to blame for this too. Taking a deep breath, I walked straight towards them. "What does all this mean?" I asked, as if I didn't understand what was happening. "Mr. Boswell," the man began, "come with us." Both agents showed their IDs before I could ask. They were extremely serious. The man, Agent Tom Wilcox, showed his ID quite quickly. In the few seconds that I saw it, it looked real. The woman, Agent Gabriella Fonts, held on to her ID a moment longer, perhaps as a courtesy. I quickly dismissed it, thinking it might be part of their good cop, bad cop game. Am I under arrest? I decided to find out right away. Where are we going? Wilcox looked annoyed that I started out that way, but never mind, I had a right to know. Fonts looked at him, almost reproachfully, before answering. "You are not under arrest, Mr. Boswell," she said softly but firmly. "We'll just take you home." "I see," I replied sarcastically. "That is, not an arrest, but a semi-official detention." She smiled, and Wilcox glared at me. At that moment, I decided that I would spend a lot of time pissing him off for fun. Both agents ignored my comment and asked if I had luggage. I nodded, and they escorted me to the delivery line. 20 minutes later, we were already driving in a black government sedan with tinted windows. Neither agent was particularly talkative. I decided to use this trip to find out how much they knew about my sad story. "So, how long will I have to put up with the new tale?" I immediately got down to business. "Maybe I should prepare a guest room for you?" Wilcox gave me a brief, stern look through the rearview mirror. "That's up to you, Boswell," he replied, as if he had been expecting my question. "And how many problems you will create for us. Let's be clear, you work for Aspen Industries. You have access to confidential information. Your wife decided to play Good Samaritan, and you went crazy. This is enough for us to keep you under observation until we are sure that you do not pose a threat to society and the medications they are receiving." Well, here it is. Noxworthy tried to make me look like an angry biochemical engineer, capable of unleashing his rage on. What? On humanity? Because Sarah is having an affair with a young man. I decided to play along. "Got it," I said dispassionately. "Even though they sent idiots, thanks for the short course. So it's the first day. I'll go home, eat, and start making a list to divide the property with my wife, ex-wife. Then I'll have a couple of glasses of single malt scotch and check my email and social media. Problems with this?" "No," Fonts spoke up now. "Everything is quite acceptable. The only thing is that you will not be able to respond to letters and messages on social networks. After all, consider yourself on a private island until the 2nd of January. I need a phone." I didn't give up. "If I don't enter Golf Rival, I will lose my championship status, which in turn will result in you and the FBI getting sued." Fonts turned around and smiled at me, but the moment quickly faded. We drove the rest of the way in silence. The house was cold and empty. We didn't live in a snowy area, but it was still freezing cold here in the winter. I quickly turned up the temperature while unpacking. I occasionally glanced around, which Wilcox and Fonts could certainly see from their sedan parked across the street and a house down. I looked at every photo, every socket, imagining them as a microphone or a camera. Finally, I decided to relax and started drinking. Let them watch. I won't be able to do anything until the next day anyway. A little later, when I was tossing and turning in bed, a plan began to gradually formulate in my head. Getting up at about 5:45 in the morning, still unable to come to terms with insomnia, I took a shower and got dressed for work. No one knocked on the door, so apparently they decided to see what would happen. I had breakfast, went out to get the newspaper, and checked how my guests were doing. The sedan was still standing there, although because of the tinted windows I couldn't see who was inside. I just saluted. I leafed through the newspaper, or pretended to read the news of the last few days, and at 7:15 I went out to my car. The sedan followed me a short distance. This confirmed my fears. I would be monitored for at least a month, and if I was going to do anything about Sarah and Stratagem, I would need to take into account their close attention. At work, I entered through the service entrance and went through the facial recognition check, just like on a normal day. The first thing I did was go to a familiar face, Daniel Corvallis, one of ours. The look of shock on his face said a lot. "Stephen," he began with concern, "what are you doing here?" Then a look of understanding appeared on his face. "We can't talk here. Shake my hand, walk by, and call my burner phone tonight at 9:30 sharp. I'll be waiting." Even the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I walked past him and headed down the corridor to the management offices. Dr. Loxdale, my boss, was sitting with another colleague, but when he saw me, he immediately turned pale and quickly apologized to his interlocutor. "Stephen," he said, clearly surprised by my appearance, "shouldn't you be on Stratagem Island?" "I must," I answered, holding out my hand to him. She was sticky with sweat, but unforeseen circumstances occurred. Sarah is still there, so I decided to go back early so as not to get bored. Loxdale pondered my words for too long, clearly trying to find the right wording. I made a puzzled face, although just 10 minutes ago this would have been true. But now I have a fairly clear picture of what is happening. "Well," he began, "that would be great, but we've already hired a temporary employee to take your place in order to keep up with the schedule. As you know, we have almost concluded a contract for the vaccine, and the project has already been given almost the green light." "Then just return me to my position early," I insisted, deciding not to make it easy for him, and perhaps extract information from him that could be used in the future. "I can't." His pause was even longer this time. "This is impossible. You are officially on unpaid leave for an indefinite period." "Sorry, Stephen." "And for what reason?" I pressed. "Because I went on vacation for a month." "No," he answered dryly, "and I can't say for what reason." He fell silent, thinking about how to soften the blow and how to get me out of his office. "I can only say that an investigation is underway, and you must remain on leave until the 3rd of January. I hope some solution can be found by then." I realized that I couldn't get more out of him. He had clearly been warned and, most likely, trained to conduct a conversation. Then I decided to leave him with a threat. "I don't know what we're talking about here," I said bitterly, "but if anyone is going to tarnish my reputation, my lawyer and I will give you hell." He looked at me with pity, as if I did not understand the seriousness of the situation. I walked back to my car, keeping my eyes on the agents. I decided to play with them, drove home in circles, accelerating hard, turning corners so they didn't have time to react, and then pulled into a fast food parking lot. By the time I arrived at the ordering window, they were already parked at the exit. I ate a burger while in their car's blind spot. Then I stopped at the store to buy everything I needed. I was in no hurry. I took more alcohol. While I was shopping, I got an idea and stopped at another place to buy some things to restart an old hobby. After a sumptuous dinner of good steak, baked potatoes, and fried asparagus, I went down to the basement. First, I took down the boxes containing my miniature trains and models from the shelf, which, by the way, also contained my old laptop. I arranged the desks to take up half the room, and placed a small workstation 4 inches below the main desks, next to the main controls, slightly to the side. I carefully arranged everything in a logical order, leaving the laptop in a plastic container until it came time to organize the tools and other supplies for repairing and rebuilding trains, rails, and other things. The laptop was wrapped in a towel, along with other parts, so agents, even reviewing surveillance tapes, were unlikely to notice it. At 9:25, I quietly took the phone out of the same box, put it in my pocket, and went upstairs to the bathroom. I hope the FBI isn't spying on my bathroom breaks. Daniel called exactly at the appointed time. I told him about what happened at Stratagem, what Sarah did to me, and who was watching me. I dictated to him my bank account details and the location of the safe key in the house. I knew that I trusted my colleague, perhaps even more than I should have, but I had no brothers or sisters, and my parents left to live in New Zealand 6 years ago. Finally, we discussed the idea that had been forming in my head, how we could replace the stratagem formulations with placebos to render them ineffective. It was an extreme decision, and I knew that if I was caught, the risk would be much greater than the possible benefit. After all, I just have an unfaithful wife who has fun on the island, like other wives, with the consent of their husbands. Daniel also pointed this out to me, saying that it was worth thinking about it carefully, and that his help would only be needed if I was confident in my decision. I hinted at the laptop by mentioning one of our old projects. He already had my old email address, a Yahoo account that I hadn't used for 5 years. I was hoping he would put two and two together. I turned to flush the toilet, and when I came back downstairs, I saw two agents standing at the foot of the stairs. "Give me the phone here," Wilcox demanded without the slightest emotion. There was no hint of permission in his tone, and I realized that there was no point in denying. This made me suddenly angry. "Damn you, asshole," I spat, pulling the phone out of my pocket and tossing it to him. Wilcox's face showed real hatred. He clearly didn't like being called names. Agent Fonce noticed this and gently placed her hand on his forearm, trying to calm him down. "Stephen," she began, much softer than I expected. "We understand. Is it true? Tom and I are just doing our jobs. Maybe you should redirect your anger towards those who are really to blame for this." "You are part of this," I replied, still pressing. "Everyone involved will pay in the end." I knew I was taking a risk, but I wanted them to engage in conversation in the hope that one of them would talk and give me at least some information I needed. Wilcox and Fonce looked at each other. She nodded, and he went into the kitchen. "Let's sit down for a minute," she suggested in the same calm and disarming voice. I sat down in my chair, and she sat down on the edge of the sofa opposite. "I think you already know, Stephen," her look was doomed, "that everything doesn't work like that. If you didn't have problems, we wouldn't be here. Whether it was your doing or your wife's, you are now a dissatisfied scientist working in a laboratory that collaborates with Stratagem. You are a security threat. National security. We're here to keep an eye on you, yes, but it goes deeper than that. We are here to wait for you to stumble and retaliate. Things like this land you in a federal detention center with no defense. I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about." She gave me time to process this, and I took advantage of the moment. I'm already up to my ears in shit, and there's no way out in sight. I briefly thought that maybe this was part of some conspiracy that Sarah had somehow been drawn into. There was something about me specifically that made the government suspicious or prompted them to take my job away. It seemed unlikely, but not impossible. And then I had another thought. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "If the goal is to catch me doing something or build a case against me, why talk?" Fonce chuckled. "I don't want this. Maybe others do, but not me, or Tom for that matter. Take my words literally and don't do anything. Nothing compromising, nothing at all." Tom returned to the room and both agents left through the front door. I was glad that none of them looked into the basement. I forgot to cover my laptop. The next week flew by quickly. During the day, I did my usual things. I cleaned the house, worked in the yard, did laundry, vacuumed, ran small errands. In between, in my free time, I worked on a formula that could render the new vaccine ineffective. I have not yet decided whether I will ever offer it to others and risk their careers and lives. In the evening, I worked on my model trains, building tunnels, bridges, landscapes, and also wrote emails to friends, typing one letter or word at a time, so as not to attract the attention of the cameras, which I now had little doubt about. On Wednesday around 6 in the evening, the home phone rang. I noticed that the number had an international code, so it was probably my future ex-wife. The residence of the former Boswells, I replied. Hi, Steve, Sarah said after a sigh and a pause. How are you? The insolence of the woman I once loved. Oh, great, I replied mockingly. I'm just wonderful. How can I be of assistance? Okay, Steve, she moved on. It was stupid of me to start like that. Sorry about all this. I called because I miss you and I needed to hear your voice. Okay, I answered immediately. You heard him. Anything else? She paused again. I love you and I'm sorry. Her voice trembled. I realized that she was holding back tears. Well, I didn't care, but I decided to listen to what she had to say. It won't change anything, but why not? What are you apologizing for, Sarah? I asked impatiently. For what I did to you, she answered without the slightest hesitation. For what she did to us, I know I have a lot to fix. Stupid woman. She thought that she could just go ahead and fix everything that had already been done. I ignored her words and asked another question I needed answers. The only question I have, I said in that neutral tone she always hated, is why did you even do that? You knew in advance how this would affect our relationship. I don't understand your motivation or your thinking. You said you saw my first interview, Sarah said. So you know my motivation. I'm sorry I was too weak to tell you. I knew you wouldn't allow it. I foolishly thought that if you were next to me on this paradise island, then I could soothe your pain, to help you understand and therefore forgive and forget. I see, I grinned. That means manipulating me. You have your words, I have mine. No, she said, hesitantly. I can understand your point of view, but I didn't mean to hurt you. Just to explain my motivation, help you forget about research, and show you how much I appreciate your understanding. Has it ever occurred to you, I asked venomously, that I might never forget this, neither forgive nor forget? No, she said confidently. I know my husband after all these years, and I just knew that with your compassion and intelligence, we could get through this. Maybe not right away, but over time. Sarah was clearly trying to avoid all those cliches that people use in situations like this. Of course, our situation was far from normal. She used the self-sacrifice card for the greater good or the good of humanity. Surely Noxworthy prepared it. Well, I sighed heavily for effect. You clearly don't know me as well as you think. Goodbye, Sarah. Wait, she screamed. Wait, Stephen, I need to tell you something. Please, and then you can hang up. I waited, but didn't pass out. She seemed pleased with this. I know you have problems, and not just because of us. Because of your work, the feds are probably tracking you. I'm sorry about that too, but listen to me. Please don't do anything stupid. Don't do anything until I get back. You can take your anger out on me. Don't get yourself into trouble. I'm begging you, Steve. I know you hate me now, at least not much, but it's my fault, not the government's or stratagems. I don't have many options, Sarah, I half lied. I'm basically under house arrest and may have lost my job. She was silent for almost a minute. I wanted to end the conversation. Steve, she replied quietly, I'm sorry, that's not what Mr. Noxworthy told me. This was a surprise. I had an unpleasant feeling. Brian, then? I exploded. He probably supports you on your free days, share a bed with you. No, she answered firmly. He's just talking to me. Support me. Apparently, he wants me not to lose motivation so that the experiments are successful. I see, I replied. So he prepared you for this conversation? No, not really, She looked confused, not knowing what to answer. We talked about you, yes. About men's feelings. About those things that women say and make everything worse because they do not understand men's pride. He didn't try to rehearse our conversation, if that's what you mean. Got it, Sarah, I replied with a note of finality. I don't want to say more. Thanks for the advice. She didn't seem to want to say goodbye, but she also didn't seem to be able to find anything else to say. She said goodbye and apologized again. That night, lying in bed, I thought a lot. Sarah, my wife, ruined my career, our marriage, and my love for her. I could not understand my indifference. I felt absolutely nothing for her, and not even a week had passed since we arrived on this island. I began to ask myself if I had ever truly loved her. The more I thought, the more I realized that this indifference would help me in the future. I can move on much faster. Soon she will also understand that there is nothing to restore. Sarah called again on Saturday. I realized that her calls on Wednesdays and Saturdays were her days off from experimenting. I didn't know if she was spending personal time with Knoxworthy or with one of the young volunteers, but she clearly felt lonely. I had little to say to her. She repeated the same reasons and apologies, but none of it found a response. The next week went much the same. In the living room, sitting in my chair, I watched TV, sometimes writing down on a notepad a placebo formula based on the expected composition of the vaccine batches. I will still need to change the formula when Aspen or our competitor, Duncan Chemicals, wins the stratagem bid. But I'm not a chemist. My specialty is developing the most effective delivery methods. The thought of me trying to sabotage the chemical compounds of a vaccine when it could be months before anyone I know even has access to this information gave me pause. In the evenings, after dinner, I worked on model trains again. I decided to create a holiday scene reminiscent of Sarah's past Christmases. My mood became melancholy when I started thinking about my future. What do the feds expect from me? Both Sarah and Agent Fonts said the same thing: don't do anything. Over the next 2 weeks, the FBI agents became friendlier to me. It was puzzling, if not alarming. In the first days, I bought eggs. I haven't eaten eggs myself. Every time I left the house to run errands, I threw one egg at their sedan. I have a terrible aim, but sometimes I hit their windshield. However, I was not so bold with the agents on duty at night. I have never met them. Sarah didn't call for the next 2 weeks. I assumed she realized the level of contempt I had for her, or at least decided that her only chance was to talk to me face to face. On December 19th, Daniel sent me a rather encrypted message. If I understand him correctly, a mutual friend of ours, Bryce Peters, who works for a competitor of Aspen, reported that his company was able to obtain a contract from Stratagem, subject to FDA approval. I knew Bryce from dinners together and intimate conversations at barbecues. He hated his job more than any of us, and was the type who was always willing to talk about the government's plans if anyone was willing to listen. Smiling internally, I thought this might be easier than I thought. I told Daniel to try to meet with him and discuss what we were planning to see if he was interested in helping. The next afternoon, Agents Wilcox and Fonts, or Tom and Gabriella, as I now called them, knocked on my door. I tried to hide the laptop somewhere before letting them in, but instead of playing FBI agent, they asked if I wanted to go to the movies with them. "Are you serious?" I asked in bewilderment. "Is this some version of good cop and bad cop?" "Not at all," Gabriella assured me. "You've been sitting in this house playing with your trains for too many days. This is unhealthy, Stephen." She didn't seem to take into account that I wasn't allowed to have contact with my regular friends, so I told them that. "It's not our fault that you only have work friends," she reproached me. "We limit you only in communication with them." Good to know, I thought. She handed me the phone with the movies near me page already open. "There are still a few days until your wife returns," she added. "And now it's the holidays. We're not completely heartless." So off we go. It was a very strange experience, especially since I was hiding information and planning corporate sabotage. After the movie, we went to Denny's. Gabriella and Tom were distant and didn't seem to want to get into a conversation about work. Instead, they asked me a lot of questions about my background and my work at Aspen. I felt like it was like an interview. Despite this, the evening turned out to be easy and even pleasant. That night, as I lay in bed, I wondered if they had some ulterior motive. Could they know about my plans? It was possible. Maybe they were trying to soften me up before Sarah returned. I never really thought about all these people I read about who were under some sort of house arrest. Stories about people who were in almost complete isolation, without any legal protection, took on a different meaning for me. Over the next few evenings, Gabriella, Tom, and I sometimes watched TV together or just talked. They always refused the alcohol I offered. On the 22nd, after we had eaten sandwiches together from a local diner, Gabriella gave me some unexpected news. "We thought you should know," she said, holding out the photo. "Your wife is not as lonely as you might think." The photo was of Sarah walking along the sand at the very edge of the waves next to a tall, handsome man. While I was peering at the photograph, I gradually began to realize that this man was familiar to me. "Do you know him?" Tom asked. "Perhaps," I replied. "He looks familiar, but I can't remember where I saw him." "This is Dr. David Prescott," Gabriella said, looking at my face. "He works with your wife at the hospital." I remembered him. We met at one of Sarah's holiday parties, either last year or the year before. I don't remember if they talked much to each other then or even danced. "Brian Knoxworthy asked your wife if there was anyone," Gabriella continued, "who could provide support to ease her loneliness and sadness. It was intended as a noble gesture, but then Sarah told him his name. We don't know if they were in a relationship before the experiments, but we thought you should know." "What are the government's plans for me?" I couldn't resist. I needed to know. Tom shrugged. "We don't have that information." "Well," I continued, "what happens to the others you watch like that?" "It depends," Gabriella interjected, "on how dangerous they are or how they can pose a threat." "When will you find out?" I asked, foolishly realizing that I was unlikely to get an answer. "When our field commander tells us," Tom answered first. "Listen, to be honest, Gabriella, and I think that you were simply unlucky in this situation. You seem like a good person who ended up in a shitty situation." "Oh no, this is my wife," I replied with a grin, "who got into trouble, and I'm just the one who will pay for it." They chuckled, although not very cheerfully, at my attempt at humor. There was silence in the room. "Stephen," Gabriella began, "you're not planning on staying with your wife, are you? You're not going to stay or forgive her, are you?" "No," I answered without hesitation. "What she did to me is unforgivable. I'll move her things to the guest room before she returns, and then tell her as soon as I see her. I hope that by then you and the feds will be behind me and I can start all over again." A knowing glance passed between them. "It seems to me," said Tom, "that this is what will cause you the most problems, that you do not intend to restore your relationship with your wife." "Well, we'll see," I replied, sighing. "Neither the government nor stratagem can force me to continue this fake game." That ended the conversation, and I invited them to Christmas dinner if they were on duty. Both immediately accepted the invitation. It would be on Christmas Eve since they had the right to spend Christmas with their families. The next day, I started preparing. It felt good to do something useful, even if it was just cooking dinner for those who follow me. My traditional dish is baby Cornish chickens, and I spent some time in an expensive store choosing side dishes. I started making other preparations as well. Via email, I asked Daniel to meet me on Christmas Eve. I was going to give him the best, in my opinion, formula for neutralizing the vaccine. By studying past vaccines, I was able to come up with a rough plan. All I had to do was make some potent sleep powder to put in 2 of the 3 chickens. By Wednesday, I had already completed this task, and our Christmas Eve dinner was scheduled to take place the next evening. On Friday, I planned to begin the process of distancing myself from Sarah in our home. As soon as the government leaves me behind, I will leave immediately. So I started gathering some things that I wanted to take with me and put them in containers in the garage. Gabriella and Tom arrived at my place at the appointed time for Christmas dinner. We exchanged greetings and congratulations. This time they shared a glass of wine, and we chatted calmly while I began setting the table. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang, which surprised me. Returning to the kitchen, I placed the bags of hot food on the counter and looked carefully at the faces of my guests. "Sit down, Stephen," Tom told me in a tone that left no choice. "We know everything," Gabriella said quietly, her voice more tinged with sadness than condemnation. "If you can remember which of these chickens isn't filled with sleeping pills, then at least you'll have something to eat for Christmas. And if loneliness during the holidays becomes unbearable, you can eat one of those you prepared for us." Crap. I got caught. I stared at them, not knowing what to say, so I just remained silent. Tom and Gabriella carried the food to the dining table and began to lay it out. Gabriella took a carving knife to cut up 2 whole chickens I had picked up from a local restaurant. She also turned off my oven. For the first 10 minutes, we ate in complete silence. Then Tom cleared his throat. "Your plan was pretty well thought out," he commented without much emotion. "But the execution is simply terrible." "Well, I'm just an engineer," I replied sarcastically. "How long have you known all this? About the laptop or everything else?" Gabby looked at me with an involuntary smile. We all laughed. "Exactly," I replied. The laughter intensified. "Are you really going to ruin the recipe for stratagem?" Tom asked seriously. "I think I need a lawyer," I replied, imitating his tone. "Not needed," Gabby noted, "and it won't help." "Why, Gabby?" I asked. "What do you want in the end? It is clear that you are following me like diligent agents, but there is something more to it. Otherwise, I would already be under arrest." "Astute," Tom chimed in. "Do you remember what happened in the Capitol 10 years ago?" "Yes," I said, uprising. "What does this have to do with me?" "Big," he continued. "Have you ever seen on the internet how people are put under house arrest because of that day? Remember when Congress questioned the director and Secretary Garland? More than 300 people were arrested. Some were not even in Washington that day. These people should have remained silent, just like you. You're not very valuable, Stephen. Unless he carried out his plan tonight, then everything would change." "So how?" I squeezed out. "When my estranged wife comes back, I'll play the game, take her back, and everything will work out. And if I don't accept it, what next? Torture, guillotine, perhaps." "We've already established," Gabby chimed in, "that you won't accept her. If you were someone who was able to just accept the situation, I would advise saving the marriage and moving on with a new job. Maybe even to stratagem. But Tom and I don't see that kind of person in you. Your plans have proven this." "So what now? I'm already tired of it." "That's up to you," Tom replied sympathetically. "Don't tell your wife anything that could turn against you or her. You won't understand the technology in this house. Tell her how you feel after everything she did, but don't discuss the consequences. Gabby or I will contact you shortly after New Year's." A thought came to me. What about the conversation we're having now? "Clever," Tom said, looking at Gabby. "We'll take care of it. Listen, Steve, your life is now in a state of chaos. You're broken by someone you love, someone you thought loved you. Your future is in doubt. When your wife returns, keep your emotions under control and keep discussions to a minimum. Gabby will contact you after the 1st of January. There may be opportunities if you are willing to take the risk." Gabby and Tom didn't stay long. Both agents followed me into the basement and took the laptop. They confiscated my notes and the formula I was working on and wished me a Merry Christmas. I was stunned. What the hell is going on? I thought. I was caught, and I thought that both agents would arrest me or take me somewhere. But it seemed like they were trying to protect me. They also knew about the laptop. I spent Christmas Day thinking, moving Sarah's things into the guest room when I wasn't congratulating relatives on the phone. I didn't plan to get drunk anymore. I thought I needed to keep my mind clear. I did as I was told. Sarah wasn't due home until the 2nd of January, so I was surprised when she showed up the next day, December 26th. She said hello while I sat in the living room. "Hey, Steve," she said with a hint of irritation and sighed heavily when she found me in the chair. "Couldn't get up to meet your wife?" I just shrugged. She gave me a withering look and went upstairs, dragging her luggage. It took a full 2 innings of the game I was watching before it showed up again. "When do we talk?" she asked with an angry expression, standing between me and the TV. "When the game is over," I answered indifferently. "So if you don't mind." I waved my hand at the TV and she went into the kitchen. An hour and a half later, I decided it was time to end it. I had a month while she was having fun to lose all my feelings for her. I have wondered many times, if love disappeared so easily, did I ever truly love it? I stood up and invited her to sit with me at the kitchen table. She took out a bottle of wine and handed me a beer. "I think I'll start," she said hesitantly. "I see you are still angry." I could end it all right here, and I probably should. I wasn't angry. I moved beyond this state a long time ago, and there was no forgiveness. At the same time, I was morbidly curious. Seeing that I wouldn't stop her, Sarah continued, "First of all, I want to apologize. I know that what upset you most was the deception and not the fact of betrayal itself. My wife seemed like a stranger to me. She chose her words carefully, trying to speak with restraint and strategically. It reminded me of that day on the island. I wasn't strong enough," she continued. "I couldn't tell you, and I stupidly thought that when we were on the island, I could convince you that it was all for the common good, and also for my own sake. Not telling you was disgusting, and without a doubt my biggest mistake. I was hoping that Mr. Noxworthy could explain better." She looked down. "I still don't know what he said to you, but obviously it pissed you off more than I could have imagined." She fell silent, gauging my reaction. I thought this would be a good time to bring up another topic. "Be careful, Sarah," I said sternly, "with what you admit. The house is bugged. People can see and hear everything we say." Sarah's face turned white. She began to look around, but did not understand. "Why did you?" she asked in shock. "You hired a security company to." I interrupted her. "Not me," I said emotionlessly. "Government, specifically the FBI. I have been under 24/7 surveillance since leaving the island resort. Every minute, every day." "But why?" Sarah didn't believe me. "Why? What have you done?" "Stop pretending." I started to get angry. "I'm sure you know exactly why. I lost my job for the same reason. Probably the same reason I would be blacklisted or worse. I could go to jail." "I don't understand," she replied. "If you didn't do anything, Mr. Noxworthy said he wants to hire you. He asked me to offer you his proposal when I returned. Why were you fired?" "I wasn't fired." My voice grew louder. "I was sent on indefinite leave. This means they don't want me to come back. Same here. FBI agents are sitting right outside. Essentially, I am under house arrest, but they do not explain the reasons and do not press charges. My life is ruined, Sarah. You ruined my fucking life." I couldn't hold back any longer. My eyes glared at her like poison escaping. Then take a deep breath, although it wasn't easy. "Sarah," I said more calmly, "let's go out onto the terrace. I say things that could make my situation worse." She followed me silently. I plopped down on a chair on the patio, exhausted. Sarah was trying to comprehend what was happening. I understood that. How many years have we lived together? She was always so naive, even when I explained it to her over and over again. "Listen," I said dispassionately. "They are against me, probably because I did not stay on the island. Now, for unknown reasons, I am their enemy, or rather, a security threat. Because of my job and skills, they probably know that I can understand some things that can cause them a lot of trouble. People in my position are expendable." Sarah didn't want to believe it, and it was written all over her face. "Understand what?" she asked in disbelief. "Some kind of stupid conspiracy theory, like, can you harm them where there is none? I don't understand what you want to say." "Stop it, Sarah," I said. "Don't be so stupid. There was something wrong with the vaccine that caused the cancer. These tests, at least for me, are just a formality, a way to cover my tracks. I know you think you went there to save lives, maybe even your own. You rely on science, which you think is free of politics. This has always been your weak spot. You believe that people work for the benefit of humanity because you yourself have always done so. But I'm not going to take it in silence, I continued. I'm going to fight, even if it costs me everything. And most likely, this will be the case if there is anything left of me. There was a pitiful expression in her eyes, pity for me. But why? She asked. Forget it, or at least try, and let's focus on us. I know I have a lot of things to fix. I understand and am prepared for the fact that this will take a lot of time, maybe even a lot. Steve, I want to bring back our happiness to help you heal from the pain I caused. If you meet them halfway, everything can work out. My wife was completely lost in her own selfish illusions. Okay, I replied sarcastically. Let's play it your way. I'll forget and probably forgive. How does this work? You and Buddy Brian will get me back on the team weight. Is that Buddy Brian or Buddy Brian with benefits? Did you sleep with him on the island too, or just with Dr. Prescott? Apparently, 16 young, fit guys were not enough. Do you continue to sleep with him while I leave you in the guest room? Sarah's face was frozen in horror. The fact that I knew her secret was the last thing she expected. Whatever her script was, it was now in the trash. She could hardly contain her sobs, and before the tears broke out, she had already run back into the house, repeating, "No, no." I finished my beer in one gulp and went to the kitchen for the next one. Sarah returned about 45 minutes later, again with a suitcase. "For what it's worth," she said grimly. "I'm sorry. I know how it sounds, but if you had stayed, if you hadn't been so obsessed with turning into some kind of criminal in your eternal quest for revenge against me and strategy, I would have stayed. I would prove my love to you. I really love you, but this is too much. Our house is under FBI surveillance, and I see that you have no interest in Mr. Knoxworthy's proposal. I'll go to David, to Dr. Prescott. He understands me and science, and you don't. If you change your mind, you know where to find me." This stupid woman moved towards me as if expecting a hug. I slammed the beer bottle onto the table, spilling it everywhere. "Don't get your hopes up, Sarah," I said with contempt. "I will file for divorce at your workplace. I think it will be appropriate. Good luck avoiding cancer. Now, leave." Sarah glanced at me, but only for a moment. She turned around and left without a word or goodbye. I sincerely hoped never to see her again. That night, I couldn't sleep, even though I was finally able to say a lot. What hurt most was the shortness of Sarah's glances. It hurt because it was always there somewhere under the surface. I was too in love to notice. Our entire marriage has been stranded in shallow waters, with sharks circling our ankles. Her beliefs, as it turned out, were narrow-minded. All her life she tried to save lives, to at least alleviate suffering. She knew nothing of what I knew about pharmaceutical companies, and she never even cared. She didn't give us a chance. In my thoughts, I heard some sounds below. I didn't have a weapon to defend myself. The rustling continued, and I heard footsteps going upstairs. Having no plan or escape route, I jumped out of bed and stood close to the door, hoping to catch the intruder by surprise. "Steve, it's me, Gabriella." Her voice was barely above a whisper, and I couldn't be sure it was her. "Don't turn on the light. I'm coming to you. Where are you?" She heard me stirring. I didn't want to trust him, but I decided. "I'm here, at the door," I whispered back. Gabby came in with a gun at the ready. She lowered her weapon and came close to me. "If you want to survive," she said, "come with me. Don't take anything. Everything I need is in my car. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. 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 Click to the next one.